So I'm sensing a trend now. Every time I start a show, we have some breaking news that comes out about 5 minutes before I'm planning on coming on air. So unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to read the specifics of this case yet, but apparently the Supreme Court has just ruled that states can purge voter rolls by targeting people who haven't cast ballots in a while. So what they're saying is, there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits states from doing voter disenfranchisement. I mean, that's what that is. And this is one of those things, man, where undoubtedly it's going to have the effect of suppressing the vote. And there's a general rule at work here when it comes to these sorts of things. Whenever voter turnout is low, Republicans have a much better chance of winning. Whenever voter turnout is high, Democrats have a much better chance of winning. The reason for that is when voter turnout is high, that means that young people came out to vote in droves. And overwhelmingly, statistically, young people are left-leaning. So, and also older people, specifically Republicans, they sort of view voting as a civic duty, so they very rarely miss elections, even really like local elections, state-level elections, where there might not even be anything else on the ballot at that particular time. They'll go and vote for it. But now, according to the Supreme Court, if you missed a few elections and the state government deems you ineligible to vote, they could just kick you off the rolls. Now, again, you might think, that seems pretty innocuous. Like, for example, people who don't follow the specifics of this stuff, when they look at voter ID laws, for example, they go, that seems pretty innocuous. I don't see what the real problem is with it. But what they're doing is they're missing the forest through the trees, because even though at face value that sounds reasonable, like, what do you mean, just show an ID when you go to vote? The effect of that is it's a giant, mallet to the kneecap of democracy. Mallet to the kneecap. That's a weird way of phrasing it. It suppresses the vote, and it does disenfranchise voters. And shouldn't we be doing the opposite in what's supposed to be a representative democracy? It's crazy to me that we see these headlines and have to cover these stories when, to me, almost the duh position would be automatic voter registration. Why wouldn't everybody just be automatically registered and registered for life? I mean, think about this, guys. There are some developed countries where not only do you have automatic voter registration, it's mandatory to vote. Now, you might say, well, that's extreme because then you can choose to sit out or whatever. But think about it. It's not like there's nothing that's mandatory in the U.S. For example, jury duty is mandatory. Everybody's gotten that thing in the mail, or most people have gotten that thing in the mail, and they're like, fuck, I got to go in for jury duty. So let me get this straight. Showing up to maybe hear a case, and of course you have to get through the vetting process and all that stuff, but showing up to, make a determination in a case, people just kind of accept as like, well, of course, that's part of being in a democracy. You have to partake in the justice system. Everybody's cool with that to one extent or another, or at least we're used to it. But the idea of floating mandatory voting is like, how terrible is that? I don't like that. And by the way, that's not saying you have to vote and, you literally are only allowed to vote for Democrats or Republicans. Mandatory voting would be, you can vote, and if you wanted to, you could write in fucking Elmo. Nobody gives a shit, but you have to vote, basically. We go in the exact opposite direction, which is we're going to try to disenfranchise people, use voter ID laws to suppress the vote. By the way, overwhelmingly, this is that cracks down on poor and minority communities specifically. When it comes to purging the voter rolls, who do you think is more likely to be purged? Old white Republicans or young or poor black people? I think we all know which direction that's going to go in. So here we go. Conservative Supreme Court, decision after decision. When it comes out, we seem to be having a similar response every time, which is a facepalm and anger.